welcome to the 700 Club. We've got a dynamite story about the possible war with China. But before I get to that, I want to introduce my new book, I Walked with the Living God, launched this week and was listed yesterday in the top Christian spiritual growth category as, quote, #1 hardcover, #3 Kindle version, and #4 audio. My dear friend Kevin Sorbo, who played the role of Hercules, has read through the entire book, and I think that's going to be interesting.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, the book was just released.
Yeah, that's right. And it went to #1. At least
well, congratulations. That's pretty exciting.
I'm very pleased, very pleased, and I appreciate everybody who's reading it. Well, in the news, conflict is escalating between the U.S. and China on several fronts, and now the threat of military action looms. What's the latest flashpoint in this global standoff, and how could it demolish a world economy already reeling from the pandemic? George Thomas reports.
For the first time, the U.S. government this week declared China's activities in the South China Sea illegal.
On Monday, for the first time, we made our policy on the South China Sea crystal clear. It's not China's maritime empire.
Now this 4 million square kilometer shipping lane is turning into a major flashpoint, so much so that Representative Ted Yoho, the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee for Asia, sees potential military action ahead, telling the Washington Examiner, "I would predict there will be a clash within the next 3 to 6 months. Such a scenario would be devastating for a global economy already reeling from a viral pandemic. Some $3 trillion worth of trade passes through the South China Sea each year.
It is incredibly important to U.S. imports and exports, and incredibly important to many of our allies and partners. There are tremendous economic interest in maintaining the freedom of navigation and commerce through that area.
China wants to limit that access, claiming it has rights to almost all the South China Sea.
China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests in the South China Sea are based on sufficient historical and jurisprudential evidence and are in line with the relevant international law and practice.
Pompeo pushing back, accusing China of breaking international law and urging world leaders to stand up to Beijing's expanding territorial ambitions.
If Beijing violates the international law and free nations do nothing, then history shows that the CCP will simply take more territory. That happened in the last administration.
America has opposed China's ambitions, including efforts to turn several islands and reefs into military outposts, complete with aircraft, runway, and high-tech capability.
This is a good old-fashioned, the biggest kid on the playground, if you will, trying to bully others, to steal their resources, and to push others who might get in their way out, and foremost of that is the United States.
Since taking power, China's President Xi Jinping has embarked on a massive military modernization. Bowman says China's military prowess is the greatest threat to U.S. military supremacy, and we could see it play out in these waters. America now has 2 aircraft carriers taking part in one of its largest naval exercises in the South China Sea.
If we just rest on our laurels and assume that battles in the coming years are going to be the same as they were in the past with unquestioned American military dominance, we have a horrible surprise coming.
This latest salvo over the South China Sea coming as tensions between our two countries continue to escalate over trade, the coronavirus pandemic, Hong Kong, human rights, and religious freedom issues. George Thomas, CBN News.
Xi is violating the power of God. There was a tremendous move of God among the Chinese people, and I forecast a couple of years ago that China would become the largest Christian nation on the face of the earth. But Xi has viciously repressed religious minorities. He's tried to re-educate the Muslim Uyghurs. It is just horrible what he has done. He has closed churches, forbidden the worship of God, and now he's embarking on a military course that is going to lead to a clash. And as that one expert said, it's very possible within the next few months that we could see a shooting war in China, because we're not going to allow them to exert hegemony over that tremendous body of water that will also threaten Japan and North and South Korea and all that entire Southeast Asian area. And we're not going to allow the Chinese to have it. And they say, well, it's ours. And we say, no, it's not. It's a big body of water, and it's an important trade route, and we're not going to let you have it. Whew. That means possibility of war, which none of us would like to see. Well, in other news, half the country is seeing spikes in death rates from COVID-19, and hospitals are running out of space. What will it take to bring this outbreak to its knees? John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington.
Thanks, Pat. Coronavirus deaths are now climbing in at least 25 states, and in some places, ICU beds are in short supply. In Florida, more than 50 ICU units are filled to capacity. Texas reporting a single-day record of 110 deaths Wednesday. Meanwhile, more school districts are announcing students will not be returning to their classrooms this fall. Houston, San Francisco, and Maryland's Prince George's County will start the year with online classes. And more state and local officials are urging people to wear masks in public. Alabama's governor making it mandatory with the threat of a potential $500 fine. Walmart and Sam's Club now joining a growing list of companies requiring customers to wear face coverings. The CDC director reminding Americans how they could help in the battle to contain the virus.
We really embrace the social distancing and hand washing. We could bring this outbreak to its knees.
Meanwhile, Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt is the first governor to test positive for COVID. Critics pointing out that he did not wear a mask at President Trump's campaign rally in Tulsa last month. Well, the pandemic is taking a toll on President Trump's standing with voters. The latest poll from Quinnipiac University shows his job approval ratings slipping to 36% and giving Democratic rival Joe Biden a big lead, 52 to 37%. The administration has been struggling to deal with the pandemic, a devastated economy, and nationwide protests. Now, with just about 16 weeks to go before Election Day, the president is shaking up his re-election team, demoting campaign manager Brad Parscale and replacing him with longtime political advisor Bill Stepien. Stepien served as field director for Trump's 2016 campaign. Parscale's been in the hot seat since that June Tulsa campaign rally, which attracted a far smaller crowd than advertised. And for more on this story, let's go to Pat.
Very much. Well, joining us to talk about the campaign shakeup is Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, Parscale was the guy who worked the figures on Facebook and to figure out how to win from a Facebook ads. What does this mean that he's being set aside?
Well, Pat, you're right. He was the digital strategy guy, and that was key for the Trump campaign. If things were coming to your cell phone and ads were popping up on Facebook, that was Brad Parscale for sure. What I'm understanding, what I'm hearing from multiple sources is that it was just time. And what does that mean exactly? Well, Brad Parscale had the Trump campaign's a juggernaut, but they need a political operative, and a good one. That was not what Brad Parscale was specifically about. Bill Stepien comes in, and he'll be the guy that can go precinct to precinct, battleground state to battleground state, and actually put boots on the ground and resources where they need to be to take it down the home stretch. That's the play here. So Brad Parscale is not leaving. He's going to be within the campaign. He's going to be doing what he does best. But it'll be a tag team approach. Brad Parscale on the digital side, Bill Stepien on the political side. That's what the Trump campaign believes is going to win it for them in 2020. We'll see.
David, I really think that the winning hand is law and order. People are so disgusted with these riots and these mobs and the attack on the police and what's happening in New York City and the major Democratic-controlled cities. I mean, don't you think that that's going to give him a winning hand?
It should, and that's exactly what the president has done as it relates to messaging, if you can call it messaging, because let's be honest, Donald Trump every day kind of goes jigsaw puzzle on the messaging. But yes, Pat, that's supposed to be the message. Here's the issue for the president and why it's different in 2020 compared to 2016. Joe Biden is not Hillary Clinton. It just is that simple. It is hard to demonize Joe Biden like you could demonize Hillary Clinton. It's just true, Pat. As much as you want to talk about Joe Biden being to the left and the far left dragging him to a certain place, that's all true. The problem is that overall, after 40-plus years in public service, Joe Biden is considered a relatively nice guy. Hillary Clinton had a whole different persona with him. And that's what the campaign understands and is realizing that, you know what, this is different this time around. They hope Bill Stepien will be able to get the president's ear and be able to have a refined message. Because let's be honest, we hear about Sleepy Joe. But you know what? Right now, the mood of the electorate seems like Sleepy might not be too bad. In other words, there's so much chaotic situations going on left and right that Sleepy doesn't sound as bad as it originally sounded when Donald Trump did that months ago.
What about all this stuff about cognitive ability? Biden said, look, my cognitive ability is just great. Well, what do you think about that?
Well, the polling is showing actually that over the majority of Americans, about 55 to 60%, think Joe Biden is going senile. That's 55 to 60% of all Americans. That's not just Republicans. So it's clearly something Joe Biden is going to have to deal with. But if you notice, folks like the Lincoln Project and many other anti-Trump groups out there are trying to combat that by saying, wait, it's the president who is unstable. So there you go, Pat. We have a race where both candidates, who's the most unstable? Between the two of them. That's kind of what it's come to. I will just point out real quick before we go the polls. Be careful on those polls. You know the deal. Yeah. That methodology is all messed up. Quinnipiac, the one that came out 52-37 for Biden, that was, not to geek out, but that was a +10 Democrat differential. And that is not exactly how the election typically will go.
What do you think is Quinnipiac? Are they slanting the sampling group?
Right, exactly. That's what it's not just what the Trump campaign is saying, but it's just the facts. I mean, the facts is that they are doing a +10 Democrat differential in the election. But if you look at the 2016 election, Democrats showed up by 5 percentage points more than Republicans. But these polls, many of them are +10% Democrat. So it's skewed very differently. Not to mention, I don't want to get into a verified voter file, but some of these polls aren't actually talking and sampling verified voters. So this is all over the place. It wouldn't surprise me if we had another shock in 2020 on election night. But we'll see. Clearly, the president and his team need to continue to get their act together.
Thank you. Well, we remember that famous headline where Harry Truman holds up the Chicago paper that says, Dewey beats Truman, you know. It's a big laugh. So anyhow, everybody went to bed assuming that Dewey was going to win, and Truman pulled it around. So just keep an eye on it. But I think, in my humble view, and maybe it's not so humble, is that law and order is going to win this thing for Trump.
I think there are also pockets of people who have determined to vote for Trump, and they don't want the hassle of making themselves known.
Exactly. I mean, their house will be trashed.
Yeah, exactly.
Their children will be fired from jobs. All right. Well, turning overseas, let's go to John.
Well, Pat, a series of mysterious explosions continue to hit Iran. The latest took place Wednesday when a fire broke out at a southern Iranian port, damaging 7 ships. The most serious explosion happened at the Natanz nuclear facility on July 1st. Some estimate the damage to that site might set back Iran's nuclear program by at least a year. Many suspect Israel or even the United States are behind the string of attacks. It's also possible an internal group inside Iran is behind the sabotage. Well, it is the brightest comet visible in the northern hemisphere in a quarter century. Called Neowise, it's providing a stunning nighttime show. After buzzing around the sun, sweeping within the orbit of Mercury, and expanding its tail. Now the comet is streaking by Earth. Its closest approach will be in 2 weeks and visible until the middle of next month. Scientists say the comet is about 3 miles across, and Pat, that is producing some beautiful images.
Well, we look forward to it, and I just assumed they didn't hit us, but there's some thought that, you know, that's how come we've got such oceans, that some comet came down with a lot of water that gave it to us. I don't know if that's true or not.
Just when you thought it couldn't get more interesting, right?
All right. Comet in the sky. That's supposed to be a forecast or something. All right, what?